Hello and good day. I'm very excited to welcome you to our first expert webinar of our new manager series, Mindset is Something You Do, with our special guest, Dorie Clark. So my name is Adam Bruniger and I lead our client solutions team here at ExecOnline. I'm joined today by Chip Cleary, our Chief Academic Officer in charge of developing our programs at ExecOnline, and Dorie Clark, who is playing a lead role in our new manager program and the star of the show today. Chip will more fully introduce Dorie and her background in a few minutes. Now, before we begin, I'd like to spend just a moment on ExecOnline for those on the line who are new to our company. ExecOnline enables organizations to rapidly deliver leadership development that creates lasting organizational impact. We do that in a few ways. We partner with elite business schools to create university certified programs delivered through our cloud-based platform. We have an enterprise-focused delivery model. We focus on your challenges to deploy solutions that integrate with your broader business problems. And we provide measurable business impact by evaluating participants' business projects to provide you with ROI metrics to make the business case for continued development investments. Now let's discuss the agenda. We have 4 items on the agenda today. First, organizational challenges with developing new managers. Now, by way of context, as many of you know, ExecOnline is building a new manager program that is launching in February of 2019. We are developing that program using a charter group process where we have invited clients to help us truly co-create the product so it is aligned with business objectives. In this first section, I'm going to quickly share with you some of the lessons we have learned about developing new managers based on our research and from interacting with our charter group members. Second, Dorie and Chip are going to discuss mindset and Dorie's perspective on how to create a manager mindset among today's often overwhelmed managers. Third, Chip is going to spend a few moments discussing the structure and objectives of the new manager program I just described. And finally, we will have time for a question and answer session. So now let's get started with our first agenda item. So I'd like to start by describing the current state of new managers, and it's not great. There are a couple of things we know. First, on the left-hand side of the page, our new managers are not performing at the level we expect. Some 60% underperformed or failed within 2 years, according to data from CEB. Second, our new managers need to raise their game. They're being asked to manage in an environment where there's more enterprise change than ever before. In the center of the page, 5 major enterprise changes in the last 5 years. And in organizations that are substantially flatter, which means managers have to manage employees with more autonomy and often less ability to provide promotions. Given these rising expectations, our clients have told us they expect the underperformance to continue. So why are new managers underperforming? When we asked our charter group this question, they gave us 3 reasons new managers failed. First, they don't activate. They don't shift mentally from an individual contributor to a manager. They're not understanding how to provide value in a different way. As part of that, they're not accurately assessing the business context or setting clear goals. But what we've learned is that even if new managers activate, they often don't adapt. So as things change in the business, they're not regularly reassessing shifts and moving their teams toward the new goal. We hear this as a big pain point for many of our CEOs as they are shifting the business. Third, they don't develop critical connections. As organizations get flatter, managers need to develop the critical connections to help themselves and their teams lead. So how are most organizations trying to solve this problem? Well, there are 3 current approaches most organizations are taking. First is what we call the fire hose approach, where organizations hold a half day to a 2-day or more meeting or workshop to raise awareness of key management responsibilities. This often does a good job of spreading awareness, but our charter members say that it doesn't lead to applications. Second is a resource library approach, where organizations provide video content for managers. The virtue of this approach is that the library can be leveraged when you have a management challenge. But what we hear is that these are often underutilized and the content is often academic. And some of our organizations, also take a blended approach. In general, very few organizations say they're satisfied with these approaches. Only 9% say they're good or better. And most organizations say they want something that is more virtual and agile. So with that as context, let me turn to Chip to introduce Dorie Clark to discuss how to make the mindset shift we talked about earlier. So take it away, Chip.
Fabulous. Thanks, Adam, for the introduction. Just a reminder, I'm our Chief Academic Officer with ExecOnline, and I am absolutely thrilled to be able to introduce Dorie Clark today. Some of you may have worked with Dorie previously. She is one of 2 experts who are helping us inform our work with our new manager program, providing insights and practices as we put the program into work. Just quick background, Dorie wears a number of hats. She is a strategy consultant working with leading organizations across industries and keeping a pulse on the challenges they face. She's an executive educator. She's an executive educator working here in the US, Duke, working internationally with HEC-Paris, and in fact, Adam mentioned working virtually online, reaching across the globe. And she's an award-winning author with a real focus on self. Her book Standout was voted the #1 leadership book of 2015, and that's one of a series of books that Dorie has authored over time, including Entrepreneurial You. And we're so excited to be working with Dorie on this program because of her background, but also because of her expertise in motivating and supporting modern new managers as they make that really what we've heard from our clients and our charter group is a tremendously difficult mindset leap from being an individual contributor to being a new manager, along with what that means in terms of redefining the self and advancing a personal brand in a different way as you move into a leader. So thanks for being here with us, Dorie. Let's go ahead and let's get started with our conversation. Mindset is something you do.
Let's make it happen, Chip. Thank you so much.
Just to get us started, we've heard quite a lot from our clients in the charter group about how hard this transition can be. It's not just a change of role, though it is that. It's not just a new set of skills, though it's that also. It's really a new way of thinking about yourself. To get us started, can you help us understand what makes this transition into management so hard?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So fundamentally, we all know that whenever someone gets a promotion, there's kind of an inflection point. There's a change. They have to learn new duties and new responsibilities. But frankly, there are some promotions that are more challenging than others. And one of the biggest adjustments that people have to make, and frankly, as a result, one of the biggest failure points, is where someone goes from becoming an individual contributor to being a manager. And that's because it's not just an incremental shift, it's kind of an exponential shift. All your life, whether it's in school, whether it is in your early roles in a career, you have been evaluated on what you do. That's very clear to people. They get it. They understand it intuitively. And all of a sudden, it's like putting the white coat on the doctor, on the medical school student, and saying, now you're a doctor. Congratulations. Now you're expected to know what to do when you're the same person as you were yesterday. All of a sudden, we are giving people responsibility not just for themselves, but for an entire team of people. Their effectiveness is not measured by what they are literally doing and literally performing with their own hands. Their effectiveness is measured in terms of a much bigger result that they are responsible for and that they have to enact through other people. And that can be a really jarring cognitive shift for people. And so we see some common mistakes, and these are the kind of things that we're going to be talking about in the course, is of course how people can spot them and be aware of them early on so that hopefully they can avoid them. I mean, we all know if you give somebody who's smart enough time, they can figure this out, but why would you let them flounder? Why would you let it take 6 months or a year or 2 years for them to make every mistake in the book, and then they have to self-correct while they're alienating people in the process? Instead, what we're trying to do is to spot some of these problems in advance so that people can be aware and preemptively adjust and correct so that they are as good as they can be at the outset. And so it's really learning to make that cognitive shift to thinking through how do you manage power? How do you manage the relationships so that you can get the most out of your team and begin to think of yourself in a fundamentally different way? So I'm going to hand it back to you, Chip.
That's fabulous, Dorie. And hearing you talk about getting in front of that mindset shift is something I know we've been working with you on the program. And it is something as we've worked with our charter group members too, and we've spoken about the skills I need to develop that I might not have had as an individual contributor. They've come back and they've said really the number one cause of failing to activate as a manager is this notion of making that mindset shift. And why don't we move ahead? And I mean, certainly what you've been saying reflects what we've been hearing is the challenge our clients face. What are some of the key challenges as I put on the white coat and all of a sudden people look to me to have some answers that perhaps I wouldn't have been looked to yesterday? What are some of the key challenges that new managers face?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few things that in the course of my research and my consulting work with dozens and dozens of leading companies that we've come across. One, which we were just referencing, of course, was the transition from being an individual contributor to managing other people. But there's a few others that are common sticking points as well that we're going to be addressing in more depth. A big one is about the question of strategy. Now, early on in your career, I mean, it's always nice to be strategic, but let's be honest, when you are at the low ranks of a company, this is not what people are really hiring you for. In fact, sometimes it may even be considered a liability if you were trying to ask too many lofty, big picture questions and they're like, we just need you to do the work. And that's the behavior that gets rewarded early on. But there is a big shift that happens because when you ascend into the management ranks, all of a sudden, you need to be cognizant of the broader strategy from coming down from the higher ranks in the organization. What are they aiming at? Where are they going? And how can you align the strategy for your team and what you're driving your folks toward? How can you make sure that that fits together in a comprehensive hand-in-glove sort of way? And how do you learn to talk about that and convey that to your people so that it makes sense and they get it and there's buy-in, so that you're not just another one of those managers that says do it because I said to do it. You want people to want to do it, and the reason they're going to want to do it is that they see and they understand and they believe in the strategy. And that is a real art form that does not get trained for in so many ways. So that's a new skill that was not required when you first hire somebody necessarily, but absolutely becomes a mandatory, frankly, if you're going to be an effective manager. So that's a big one. Another one is something that we're hearing, especially these days, is agility amidst change. You have probably heard the statement, and it's almost like a Zen koan. If you turn it around in your brain, the world will never move as slowly as it is moving today. I mean, think about that for a minute. We all feel overwhelmed right now. The average professional, studies have shown by the Atlassian group, the average professional attends 62 meetings per month. The average professional, according to the Radicati group, sends or receives 122 email messages per day. Everything is flying at us. We feel overwhelmed, slightly out of control. There's new trends, there's new developments, and yet this is the slowest it will ever move. It's only going to get busier from here. And so fundamentally, and this is something I talked about a lot in my first book, Reinventing You, what we need to master, the fundamental skill of the 21st century, is agility, adaptability. And so if you're going to be a successful manager, you're going to have to learn to roll with the punches, to get comfortable with it, to understand that, strategy might change on a dime. And you have to be okay with that and be okay communicating that and leaning into that with your people. So that's a huge one. Also, we're going to go, as we think about strategic challenges for new managers, there's kind of a perennial one. This is something that has always been the case, but absolutely remains it, and that's communicating effectively with your new employees. In the past, when you're an individual contributor, of course, everybody needs effective communication skills. That's just part of being a grown-up human. But all of a sudden, when you're a manager, it takes on a new level of responsibility, because you can't just kind of go over in the corner and do your thing and stay out of the drama. All of a sudden, it is your responsibility to have difficult conversations. And, of course, that's a little uncomfortable for some people, but a huge thing that people have to realize is that you are actually doing people a disservice if you do not have those conversations. It may feel weird, it may feel bad, it's really tough to tell people that they're not necessarily doing a good job or that they need to do something differently, but you are actually harming them more in the long run if you don't say it, because you're not giving them a chance. And so learning to master that skill, that's a huge thing that we're going to be talking about. And then finally, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the next slide, it's about becoming comfortable with a role. You guys are perhaps familiar with the concept that gets talked about sometimes, imposter syndrome, and it certainly comes up for a lot of people in those early days when they are adjusting to a new identity. There's often a lag in terms of self-perception. And that can play out in interesting ways sometimes when it comes to taking on your role as a new manager.
And Dorie, before we move ahead to the imposter syndrome, let me just take a step back and ask about these challenges, because as Adam showed up front, we've heard new managers can fail to activate, they can fail to adapt. Organizations may be looking for more from their new managers now than perhaps they did 5, 10, 15 years ago. Can you tell us a little bit about, you used the word perennial. Some of these challenges are the same they've ever been. Some have to do with the new world. What's different about today's world and what's different about today's workforce that may change what we're requiring from new managers? So as we're working with you on the program, what should we have that's different about the program today because the needs of new managers have changed?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of important aspects to this. One that is probably evident to anyone who's doing business these days is that if we were having this conversation 20 years ago, first of all, we probably wouldn't be doing this online if it were 20 years ago, because no one would have had the bandwidth, literally the internet bandwidth, to be able to do it. But that actually points at a significant change, right? Which is that because we didn't have the internet bandwidth, we didn't have Skype, we didn't have the ability to do these things, so much of what management entailed was just dealing with people in a room and dealing with the same people in a room, because travel's onerous, right? Nowadays, you are dealing with clients, you're dealing with customers, you're dealing with colleagues, you may even be dealing with team members that are remote, that are global, that may not be based in the same location. Or even if they are in the same location, they may be from all around the world. And so there's questions of diversity and managing for diversity so that you can really harness the power of that, the innovative power of that, rather than having it be be seen as a threat or a liability. How do you make that a good thing? And how do you communicate across different channels? A lot of the conversations you might be having are on Skype, or they're somehow being communicated across distances. So those are important skills to keep in mind. And I think harking back to a point we were making earlier, it really is about the questions on agility. There's interesting research done by John Seeley Brown at Deloitte Center for the Edge, where he has suggested that the so-called half-life of skills now is actually rapidly diminishing. That the half-life of a new skill is perhaps only about 5 years. Now, certainly there's, we're talking about the sort of perennial versus the current. The communication skills are an eternal skill. That's never going to go away. But if you think about something like, let's say, a computer program or something like that, it's quite possible that that is going to be eclipsed in a few years. And so no one can sit on their laurels. No one can afford to sit back and say, well, I have it all figured out. There's a need for an attitude of continuous learning, and there is a need for the adaptability to understand that circumstances may change very rapidly, and we've got to get comfortable with that.
That's great. And yeah, and I really like the fact that we can do this online today, Dorie. I know when I started in business, I would have actually faxed you the questions, and maybe you could fax me a response back. So this is working.
I was thinking carrier pigeon, but you're more high-tech than me, Jeff.
Yeah. So, and you had mentioned imposter syndrome, and I know also hearing from our charter group members, they've spoken to us about the emotional roller coaster that it can be to become a new manager, and the journey that I go on. And I really liked your metaphor of, now today I wake up and I get to put on the white coat, and all of a sudden people look at me in a different way than they looked yesterday. Can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about what makes it this journey such a difficult emotional journey?
Yeah, certainly. So when it comes to being a new manager, and again, we were talking about this kind of broad cognitive shift that people go through from being an individual contributor to now managing other people, being expected that your results are their results. And that's sort of a heady thing. But what it also means, frankly, is that you've got this team of people who are looking to you for answers. And, just a week or a month or whatever before, you were looking to somebody for answers, and now they're coming to you. And it brings up a lot of questions for the person who has been elevated to this level, because they know that they're not a different person, and they know there's a lot of things they don't know. And the challenge is that for many people, it is, as you guys have probably heard and read in the research, it is not at all uncommon to have the feeling, oh my gosh, I'm going to be found out. Somehow these people are going to discover that I don't know all the answers, and then all will be lost. And that is kind of frightening for somebody who's newly in a position, who wants desperately to do a good job. They're not totally sure how to do a good job, but they want to do it. And so that can lead to feelings of isolation, because a lot of times people, especially if you're a new manager, if you haven't, been reading business literature for 20 years or whatever, you don't necessarily know that, guess what? Everybody feels this at one point or another. You feel like it might just be you. And if that's the case, oftentimes it leads people into compensatory behavior that is not always the most effective. If you desperately want to look like you know what you are doing, it might lead you to essentially be making guesses without full information, rather than actually asking around, to people who might have some guidance for you. That sometimes can be damaging to the long-term strategy. It may lead you to look a little more forceful or a little more autocratic, because you so desperately want to convey that you have it under control and you know what is going on. And, for obvious reasons, this is not what we want. What we want is somebody who is a secure and confident enough leader that they are comfortable showing that they know some things, they don't know others. But in the early stages, it can feel a little tenuous for a new manager. And so one of the things we're really trying to get at in the course is helping people be aware of these dynamics, so that if they sense them in themselves, that they can take action to feel okay about it, to understand where this is coming from, and to make sure that they're seeking the information and the guidance they need in productive ways, rather than kind of blindly flailing and acting out in ways that can be damaging to the team.
And to follow up on that, Dorie, I mean, it's certainly, the notion of, a mistake I can make is be autocratic because I am scared, and so I'm going to bluster my way through this. Or alternatively, a mistake I can make is to step back and be quiet and not put a voice forward, because again, I'm scared and I don't want to be found out as wrong. And, I know when talking with you and working on the program, we've talked about the notion of, once I wear that white coat, I'm now in a position of wielding power. And for many of today's new managers, that can feel uncomfortable. I mean, can you help us think about how we can help new managers think about the power dynamics of their role as they move into management, and how we can help them think productively about how to leverage power as they don that white coat?
Definitely. So we all know, any of us who are students of history, that or just working in organizations, power can be used for good or for evil, and so many people have kind of awkward relationships to it sometimes in the earliest stages where they're presented with it. All of a sudden, I mean, picture it, right? You're a new manager, you've been elevated, and you may in fact be managing people that you used to work with, that used to be your colleagues, your friends, and now you are expected to somehow be the boss. And that can feel really jarring and disconcerting. And so, as you were alluding to earlier, Chip, what we have often seen is that people sometimes veer to one of two extremes. They either, as I was talking about a little bit with the imposter syndrome, try to kind of clamp down and control things so much, to really demonstrate their competence, that they overcorrect and they get too forceful, too directive, too, do it my way because I said so, which obviously in the long term is not a great way to build team morale or sustained team performance. The other alternative is that people sometimes abdicate power because they feel like, oh, but who am I to tell these people what to do? I don't really know more than they do, or gosh, it feels weird. They're my friends, and I don't want to be that boss guy or whatever. And so they kind of step back too far. And the problem, of course, is that when people step back too far, there becomes a power vacuum, and guess what? Someone will fill it. And if the person filling it is not the boss, that can create some really strange and awkward and potentially damaging situations, because you did not choose that person to be the boss. So the way that I like to think of it, kind of the metaphor about how do you use power effectively? How do you use power for the common and sustained good of other people? Not about yourself or your self-interest, but how do you use power in a way that helps everyone? I think of it like a dinner party, because I often host dinner gatherings, and here's something that I have learned from personal experience. If you just totally abdicate as the host, if you say, you know what, these are good people, they'll figure it out. Well, guess what? If there is no direction at that dinner party, all that's going to happen is that all your guests are just going to talk to the person next to them, because they don't know how things are supposed to run. They have no idea. And so it's suboptimal for them. I mean, they would like to meet other people, but they don't really know how. They don't want to be the one random person that's walking across saying, hey, I want to switch seats with you so I can talk to Bruce or whatever. They're just going to sit back and talk to the person next to them, and it is a suboptimal outcome for everyone because people don't get to meet each other. And on the other hand, you don't want to have such a heavy hand with it that you say, oh, everyone's going to talk about this now, and you force something down people's throats. What you want is to be the kind of host that is just directive enough that it enables a great conversation to flourish. You're the person that, if somebody starts rambling a little too long, you gently redirect them. You're going to be the person who helps introduce folks to each other so they're building their relationships. You lead, but with a light touch. And when you do that, it's incredibly powerful. It brings the entire night together. It brings people together for a better experience. That's what we want in a leader. That's how we want our managers to think about wielding power for the benefit of others.
And as you know, Dorie, we love this metaphor of the dinner party and look forward to incorporating it. Throughout the program, we're really looking for practical advice of how new managers can think and what they can do. And for years, there's been the concept of a service orientation and service leadership. And I think it can be a little bit unclear. How do I make that real? And this notion of, oh, I am the host. It is my job to create the environment and to make the directions that help us understand how to behave, that will help us all. We just find fabulously powerful. So we're really looking forward to incorporating this along with other ideas. Now let me take a little bit of a transition. I mean, so far we've talked about the journey from the new manager's perspective. And we can also step back and say, let's think about this from the home organization. If we're leading an organization and we'd like to actually be now the host of the dinner party for our new managers to be able to give them a productive journey as they move forward. How is it? What can organizations do to better support new managers?
Yeah, thank you, Chip. So when we're looking at it from the enterprise level, what can companies do? There's a few key things here. So the first one is, we had talked earlier about the importance to new managers of adopting that strategic lens and really understanding kind of where they fit, where their team fits in terms of the overall strategy and how they can help move it forward. But a key part of it is certainly it's on the new manager to orient him or herself to it and understand it. But the company can really be helpful here. If the company has the explicit orientation that they want to make sure that their managers understand the strategy, that they are communicating it actively and repeatedly so that everybody gets it and everybody's on the same page, that makes a huge difference in terms of alignment that we're all seeking. Another thing that's really important is, we know intellectually, sure, we can say, okay, yeah, sure, no one needs to know all the answers, but in a lot of ways that doesn't really help if you are that new manager who feels that pressure and you have your team members saying, well, what do I do? And you think, oh my God, I don't really know what to do. It's kind of a harrowing moment if you're in that situation. And what we need to do for the person in that moment is to create a corporate culture that lets them know, that says it explicitly so that they get it. It's not just them, they're not some freak outlier. Everyone else knows the answers and they don't. We need to let them know that it's okay to not know all the answers. Now, of course, you want smart, knowledgeable managers, but there is literally no human that's going to know all the answers. And so encouraging and saying, you know what, that's okay. This is a thing to not know all the answers, and here is what you can do. I have a concept that I talk about in my book, Reinventing You, called developing a mentor board of directors. I think there's oftentimes in the corporate world a huge focus on the importance of mentorship, as there should be, but often the way that it gets talked about is that there's this one perfect mentor. Oh, find your mentor, and then that person is going to be your North Star for life. And I think oftentimes in practice, that's not the most practical thing, because the truth is many of us can't find that person. They either don't exist, or if they do exist, they're kind of too busy to have time to help you. And so instead, I like to encourage a mentor board of directors where we're not necessarily looking for one perfect person to solve all our problems, but instead we are thinking about an array of people, let's call it 3 people or 5 people or whatever, that we look to and we say, I admire this part of what he does, or I admire this skill that she has. And then we're able to learn those pieces and learn from a wide variety of folks. That can really help make a difference in terms of who to go to if we have questions or we don't know. And then finally, the last piece is there is always, this is another one of these perennial challenges, but very important in corporate life. There's a tension between the short term and the long term. We all know this, right? And so there's often a real bias for the urgent, the short term. It's, get the results now. We need the sale this month. We need it this quarter, boom, boom, boom. And there can be a pressure that kind of gets intensified as you go down the ranks to drive the results, to drive the people to get it done. And of course that's critically important, absolutely. But what new managers who feel that pressure so keenly, who are so nervous about wanting to do a good job and establish themselves in this first role that they're having, what they need to understand as well is that your corporation also believes in the importance not just of the short term and extracting all the value from your people and driving them until they're exhausted, but also it is important and valued for new managers to drive professional development for your people, for your employees, because that is what keeps people happy and fulfilled and motivated over time is what helps you populate your management ranks of the future. And it's a way of creating a kind of balance so that it's not just about, driving people mercilessly, but instead it's about cultivating their skills as professionals so they have more to give over the long term.
And that's fabulous too, and I can see how the mentor board of directors too, in a world in which the world will never turn as slowly as it turns today, and there is constant pressure on results, can help individual new managers strive to take that balance themselves. And Dorie, I'd like to leave some time for Q&A. But let me just say before we move ahead, how pleased we've been to have the opportunity to work with you, and we've loved the collaboration on the program. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Chip. I'm really excited to be part of this, and I think that we're creating a really cool program for people. I'm excited for people to dive into it.
Well, let's open up the curtain a little bit on that program. And so we do want to leave time for Q&A. So, for those in the audience, if you have questions, you want to may take a minute to start to think about what they are and enter them into the chat. But at this point, let me spend just a couple of minutes to give a little background about the program that we're baking in the oven at this point. So if you can move ahead to the next slide. As Adam mentioned, we're launching this program in February, and to help you understand the program. First, what we heard from our charter members loud and clear was this phrase journey, that moving into new management, it's a journey that I go on, it's a journey that takes time. And so if you look at what's on the page here is the structure of the program, which consists of an initial required program, Build Your Foundation, which is a 3-month program. That's a required element, and it tackles, well, you've gotten a sense from today of what it tackles. It tackles this notion of mindset shift. It helps new managers build a management toolkit and actually puts them in a position of setting goals for their team and being agile and updating those goals. So building in an agility cycle over time. And that's the starting point. And then after that, there's a suite of add-on programs on skills that are critical for new managers to deepen over time. Communicate, influence, leading continual change. And these are shorter programs, 1 month each, and they're mix and match. So the notion is each organization can build the program, the journey that's right for their managers and meeting the needs of the day inside their organization. So that's an overview of the program structure, required 3-month program followed by a series of add-ons using the content from Dorie and other experts. And we'll talk a little bit about the structure and the journey moving forward. So why don't we move ahead, if that's the structure of the program, talk a little bit about what are the objectives for the program. And I'll move through this pretty quickly. Because one thing that becomes clear very quickly as you begin to work on new managers is that, as you've even seen in the session today so far, there's a lot that's different today from where I was yesterday. First amongst that is adopting a leader's mindset. The things we've been talking about today, leaning into the role, moving myself out of that individual contributor mindset so that I am playing the role of the host of the dinner party. While I'm doing that, managing my emotional roller coaster, making sure that I identify my personal brand, myself as a leader. And, that means taking some responsibility for leading myself by doing things like forming my mentor board of director and making sure that I'm cascading the organizational objectives to help the organization move forward with the C-level strategy. So, that tackles, what we heard loud and clear from our charter group member of the key challenge that more new managers fail on than others is moving into that leader's mindset. From there, there's a toolkit of skills that I require as a new manager. I won't take us through all of these, but they range from the perennials of how do I delegate, how do I coach, to how do I manage across time horizons, as the pace of change accelerates. How do I establish focus across dimensions for myself, for my team, for the objectives we're pursuing, so that as change happens, we make sure that we focus on really what's going to drive the organization, drive our personal development, and keep moving. And then finally, this third bucket, execute with agility. something that really we heard quite clearly in our work with charter group members is, it's the case that some new managers do a great job of standing up, beginning to lead their team, beginning to align to objectives, and then they take a moment to relax, to say, okay, great, I've moved forward. Now I need to operate the machine. So I move a little bit away from the leading, more towards managing my team. And we've heard how executing with agility is absolutely a critical skill, and it's something we're building into even that first Foundations 3-month program. So we're looking forward to pushing with that, and it's a constant process of aligning to my context, inclusively seeking input from the right places, not simply focusing on how do I fix errors, but really accelerating change by amplifying what's working, and then helping my team sit back and observe how are we working together today, how can we work better together tomorrow. While I'm doing that, we've heard many of the participants who will come into this program are player coaches. In today's world, lots of player coaches. So in that notion of how do I make decisions of when do I jump in and lead directly, when do I do it myself, when do I help my team execute, and how do I bring my team along with me. So those are the suite of program objectives. Now let me just give a quick preview of the journey we'll create from those objectives, because again, as Adam shared, it's easy for us to strive to make people aware of what they must do as new managers. The real challenge we've heard is how do we help them apply? How do we help them put it into practice? How do we help them get the organizational impact that they require from the role? And so, from our perspective, that requires a transformational learning journey. And for those of us who you have worked with ExecOnline, you'll know our mantra of learning by doing with impact. So we really want to create a learning by doing experience. This is not exposing new managers to relevant content. That's helpful, but that doesn't hit the mark. It's really helping new managers achieve their objectives. And so the way we've organized the program is in 6 bi-weekly modules, so 12 weeks for that first 3-month program. Inside each module, we organize around an assessment, a thing I will get done by the end of the week. Now, to help me get that done, we'll provide content from Dorie and from other experts. We'll provide assessments, research, background that helps me understand how I'm likely to behave and how that compares to how my team needs me to behave. We'll provide learning activities like again, assessments and practice activities and challenge scenarios so that I feel comfortable taking this work out into the field. But really taking it out into the field and completing that assignment is critical to achieving impact, and we'll put the same thrust on that as we do in our other programs. And part of that is during the course of this, I'll be building, sharing with my team, but mostly with my manager, a leadership plan and implementing that leadership plan through the program. And so making sure that I'm aligned with my boss for where we're headed, why we're headed, and what we're doing about it, is something that I'm going to do incrementally as I work through the program. So that's a quick overview of the transformational learning journey. If you just click on the slide at this point, one final comment I wanted to make is, we spent some time today talking about the emotional journey of being a manager, and we've heard from our charter group members how lonely it can be. And so one element of the program I wanted to highlight as we wrap up this section is that we're building into the program a series of ways that I, as a new manager, collaborate with peers in a safe zone so that I can actually share how it feels for me. I can hear how it feels for you. I can build that confidence so I'm not the only one feeling that imposter syndrome. We're doing that through group work in pure live forums. We're doing that through a buddy system with learning partners. And we're introducing a new element we haven't had in our prior programs, which are group weekly coaching sessions that we're calling momentum coaching sessions. So we're really thrilled about how the program is turning out to be able to take that pretty daunting list of objectives and convert them into something which is practical for me as a new manager to do as I work through it with other people who are working through the same things at the same time. So that's a quick overview of the program. We can take questions about that during Q&A. Adam, let me turn it back to you to share a little bit about our timing to bring this program to market.
All right, thank you very much, Chip. So let me share with you the key dates for the launch of this program. So as I mentioned earlier, we are working with a charter group to co-create the product, and as part of that, charter members are actually receiving special pricing. And so the last date to sign up for the charter group is actually November 16th. So that's coming up pretty soon, and that requires a commitment, for the February program. So, if you're wondering, what is it like to be part of the charter group? As part of being a member of the charter group, we'll invite you to our upcoming focus group, and we'll also be soliciting some feedback from you on a one-on-one basis. And as I mentioned earlier, we really want to build this product, with you, and that's been sort of our guiding principle across the course of building the program out. So this is a great opportunity for each of you to engage with your peers and help build out a product that is really at the cutting edge. So November 16th, if you want to be part of that charter group process, that's the key date to be part of that process. But just because you can't hit the November 16th date does not mean that you cannot participate in the program launch on February 25th. So for those of you who are unable to make a commitment by then to help shape the product and receive the special pricing, the next key date is December 31st, when we need commitments for the February launch. On January 24th, the final roster is due, and the welcome module opens. And then on February 25th, we will launch this product, and all of us here at ExecOnline and Dorie Clark, we're all very excited about that launch. So you're probably wondering, if you're not a current participant in the charter group and so are not currently part of this, how do you contact us to participate? So what is the way in which you can do that? Well, if you'd like to learn more about our new manager program, please email us at enrollment@execonline.com. So to get started again, so just one more time, it's enrollment@execonline.com. So let's get into the question and answer session. So with the remaining time left, we're gonna have some question and answers. Please type your question into the chat box. So I see that some have already been doing this. This can be a question for Dorie. This can be a question about the program, just add it into the box, and then I'll direct it to the right person, as we get, those different questions. And so we have some coming in. And so I will start with the first question, from one of our respondents. So what would you say to and this, I'll direct this one to Chip. So what would you say to the devil's advocate position of, these are nice and lofty goals, but I have real skills I need them to learn first, like how to hire the right people, how to manage underperformance that they're going to need to do as soon as possible?
Yeah, great question. And in fact, in talking to our charter group members, we pretty explicitly spoke about this question. I mean, just to step back for a minute, a fairly traditional approach to a new manager program might be to think about the building blocks of some essential skills, like we've listed here in the question, and say, let me get those building blocks in place, and then let me get to those loftier goals, later on. And what we've heard back from that is two issues. One, that once I burn in as a manager, thinking that my job is to do the essential skills, and that's actually what my mission is, it's very, very difficult to get me to really lift my sight to what I can achieve as a leader of my team. And so that notion of adaptation, that notion of strategic alignment, those notions, that notion of really driving the emotional tenor of my team is something, the notion of being the host of the dinner party, as Dorie says, is something which is very difficult to add on later in the journey. A second thing that we've heard from our charter group members is, in today's world, the notion of having those higher order skills that the ask is higher of new leaders now is more important than it's ever been before. And so that's what's led us to the approach of moving to say, let's actually tackle mindset and toolkit and agility in that initial program. Now, the way we accomplish that is in a way that will tackle the notion of inert knowledge. That issue of, if I do use the fire hose approach, will I leave my participants with inert knowledge? The way we're handling that is to take, I mentioned the 6 modules, each with an assignment. Inside those assignments, for me to succeed, I need to do things like interview my stakeholders. So I need to develop my listening skills, and that's one of those critical skills. I need to be able to prioritize, and so I get practice applying prioritization skills very early in the program. I need to be able to coach and delegate. And one of the things we're having you do in your program is look at what roles are and what roles could be and begin to reshape those roles. But that's putting you in a place where all of a sudden I see, oh, I see how working on those skills will help my team concretely. I see how it will help me concretely create space to lead, and it's giving me an opportunity to practice that I might not have in a different program design. So we don't really see it as a let's emphasize one or the other. We see it as let's actually put you in a position where you are leading, and all of a sudden putting you in that position is creating you to have a pull to have those essential skills that might have felt like something that the HR organization was saying was good for me, but I really didn't see the motivation behind it. It's part of the transformational journey. Let me pause there on that answer. But great question. It's one we've, as you can tell, we've put some passion behind as we've been working on the program design.
Great. Yeah, thank you, and to everyone on the line, keep adding questions. We're getting a number of different questions coming through. Got some more questions about the program objectives and the program itself. So a couple more for Chip as well. So another one, Chip, when you go through communications and handling difficult conversations, does it include coaching and feedback? As part of that in terms of that part of the program.
Yeah, good question. So the structure that we've put in place is we actually have each of those as a separate assignment task that you'll handle in a separate conversation. So we do have a moment where you are reaching out to set expectations, for example, to drive a quick win with your team. We have a point where, as you're looking at roles and reallocating roles, that you're delegating responsibility and you're helping people to coach. You're taking a coaching position to help your team members take ownership over a task yourself, instead of having you jump in as the expert to tell them how it's done. So we have moments in the program for each of those. The challenging conversation moment is a little bit of a special case, because most of the skills I've talked about to date are tasks that a new manager will be doing day in and day out, and it's easy for us to presume that there's a moment for that to happen. The challenging conversation we're handling is a little bit of a separate case in that activity, where we're making sure that you can find a moment that's relevant to you to have really an authentic, challenging conversation that will drive benefit. And so, we have different moments where we encapsulate each of those application exercises, but clearly, that notion of bringing in expectations, bringing in coaching to the challenge conversation, that's a build. So that's how we're tackling it.
Great, and a few more questions around, again, the program itself and some of the structure. A lot of great interest around this. So how will the program be facilitated across time zones, cultures around the world? Chip?
Fabulous. And this is something that ExecOnline has had, really fairly deep experience with over time. It's something that we face in our prior programs as well. So the short story behind that is that the program, there will be online self-study aspects of the program. There will be group aspects of the program. For the online self-study components of the program, not an issue. For the group aspects, we'll have multiple time zones for the key events. And so, traditionally we've used 2 time zones, so we run each event multiple times, where I can suggest what times are convenient for me, and we keep pretty close tabs on our ability to meet those time frames and put people in the time zones that they seek, and that's worked really fairly successfully for us over time.
Great. And so another couple of questions, Chip, around, so I think one of the things that we heard, very loud and clear, going through the charter group process, was around the peer engagement piece of it. So being able to engage peers, being able to learn from peers, being able to connect with peers. And so people have some very specific questions around the peer engagement model. that we're building into the program. And so maybe take both of these. The first is, will the peer forums be intra or intercompany? So if you kind of describe how the peer forum structure works for us. And then also, who are the coaches for the momentum coaching session? So if you could describe, those momentum coaching sessions as well, that would be great.
Yeah, great question. So first, just to take them in order, on the peer forums, so the peer forums will be large group sessions with small team breakouts will be the structure of those. So again, for those who are used to our live forums in our current portfolio, these will be a similar structure to that. In terms of the intercompany versus intra-company, the large group will be mixed companies. This is something which, again, our charter group members have said that they're actually keen to have exposure across organizations for their new managers. At the same time, those team breakout sessions, can be a little sensitive. And so with that in mind, those will be structured as intra-company. So, it will be actually, if the answer to the question is, will they be intra or inter? The answer is both. The large group portion of it will be inter. The small team portion of it will be intra. So those will be, one way that I will get to interact with share the struggles with other new managers as we work through the program together. I did mention the momentum coaching sessions. These are sessions that will run weekly, and they'll be tailored to the challenges that are relevant to that week in the program. Where will people struggle? What are the challenges that are happening? In order to tackle those sessions, we're going to provide the option to run them on multiple days where I can join the session that's going to work for me. And we'll support them with ExecOnline coaches as our facilitators for that. We have a group of coaches that we use currently in our programs and which we'll leverage for this too, who provide executive coaching, who provide feedback, and inside this program they'll be running those weekly momentum sessions.
Terrific. Thank you, Chip, again. So at this point we've only got a few minutes left, and so I want to thank everybody on the call for dialing in, for participating, for being able to provide your different questions. Maybe just to close out, I wonder if Dorie can provide maybe just a few final words, in terms of the new manager program, around the new manager journey. But Dorie, if you could just kind of close us out, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks to everybody for joining us. It's always a pleasure to get to speak with you guys and to dive into this question. I mean, the reason I think you're on this webinar is that you recognize the importance of this topic. It's an inflection point in someone's career, and there is a disproportionate impact. We all have heard, everybody who works in and follows the business space knows people don't leave a company typically, they leave their manager. And it's because on a day-to-day basis, they're not getting the kind of support they want, or development, or it's just a subpar relationship. And so we can make a disproportionate impact for our companies and for our results if we invest in making sure that the people who are elevated to be managers, the people that we believe are smart and have promise and can do great things, that we give them the tools to be able to do that. If they're smart folks, they can maybe learn it on their own over time, but why do that when instead we can help people to see better around corners and create a better outcome, not just for themselves, but for all of the people that they are touching and all of the people that they are helping and cultivating and hopefully bringing up behind them. And so I'm very passionate about the topic and really excited to be working with you guys and hopefully with your people about it, because when we can make a change at this level, it it ricochets throughout an organization. It touches everyone and everything, and it makes us better and more effective. So thanks for taking the time, and I'm really excited about the project, and I hope you guys are as well.
Thank you, Dorie, and thanks again for leading the way here, and we certainly appreciate so much all of your thoughts and all of the collaboration in building this program. And so to everyone on the line, thank you again for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you and your organization in our charter group and as part of our new manager program. So thank you very much, and that concludes the webinar.